Hello and welcome to the podcast. I am Taylor Jackson, and I'm here to talk to you about wedding photography. This podcast is all things specifically wedding photography, although within this, there is some out-of-scope travel content as well because of the nature of the topic, which today is destination wedding kits. And what I'm bringing, and also what I'm bringing, we're kind of on a trip, I guess, for the next couple of weeks. And there is a wedding within that trip. So not only am I packing for, I guess, just the general kit that I want to bring to travel, but I also have to bring a wedding photography kit as well. And then at the end of this video, we're going to do a Q&A. So I'm going to answer a couple of questions. And if you have any questions and you're watching this YouTube video, you can just plug the question right in the comments below and I'll get an alert and I'll put it in the next episode. Or if you're listening to this on audio, there is a link in the show notes that will bring you to the YouTube video. And if you have a YouTube account, you can just comment there and I'll get back to you. That's how it works. So here we go. Destination wedding kit. The way that my destination wedding kit differs is typically you're going into more of maybe an elopement or just a smaller wedding style of environment, which means I typically don't have a use for 70 to 200. So that is one lens that I will usually bring to wedding day. And I guess I'm talking to the scope of what I've done in the past, the Tamron 35 to 150. We'll talk about that in a minute. 70 to 200 gets left out of my kit. And typically I will bring a 35 and maybe an 85 or maybe a 35 and a 50. And that is my kit. So wedding day at home, I probably have a 35 on one camera body that I use very rarely. It's typically in my bag. I don't even carry it with me. It's not on a harness or anything. And then I have an 85 on the other camera or potentially a 50. This year I've been using the 50 Sony 1.2 a little bit more, or the wedding lens of the year, Tamron 35 to 150. That is also sometimes on my kit. That would be a great destination wedding lens to bring because it will just literally do everything for you. So if you had a 50 as a backup and the 35 to 150, I feel like you'd be fine. I feel like you don't need anything beyond that. You might be like, well, I need something wider. What happens if I need a wide lens? And if you like wide lenses, by all means, bring a wide lens. I have discovered that in all of my weddings, with the exception, again, of the cake cut, I usually need a wider lens, but I could get by with 35 if I needed to. I'll usually bring a 20 or a 24 for that, as well as kind of the party. But usually I'm pretty happy on my 35. To talk specifically about the gear that I am bringing to this wedding, I will have with me. So I'm going to be bringing a bonus lens for just general travel, which will be the 20 millimeter f1.8 Sony. So that's kind of outside of weddings, but also I'll bring it to the wedding just in case I need it. I don't suspect that I will need it. And then the other lenses that I'm going to be bringing, 35 millimeter f1.4 GM, as well as the 50 1.2 GM. So I am a 35 and 50. I will probably spend most of the day on the 50. I'm also doing a priority on wedding video. So I'll be making another full video on the main channel about that. But kind of what that means is that I am a video person there that's just also going to do some family photos and some photos of the couple. So my role has completely flipped. I will be using the 50. I will be using active stabilization on my Sony camera for it, which if you're coming from a DSLR and the digital stabilization was always trash and not usable, the active stabilization, the digital stabilization that stacks with your lens and with the IBIS on newer Sony cameras is honestly quite incredible. And I love it a lot. Gives you a tiny little crop. So I think you get a 1.1 time crop whenever you do use it. So that's a bit of a bummer, but it doesn't really matter that much, especially the fact that you don't have to warp stabilize anything in post. You could also shoot everything without it, just regular IBIS, and you could go into something like Catalyst Browse and stabilize it if you wanted, or even just warp stabilize in Premiere would probably get you pretty close. But I like to do everything that I can within my camera. That camera that I will be bringing is the Sony A7R Mark V. And this is a camera that I have to do further testing on its hybrid capabilities for photography and video, for doing a lot of photos. It's a high megapixel camera. The files take a minute to write, even if you're shooting on the medium RAW size. So the downside potentially with it is in a faster paced environment, it might not keep up as well as something like the A7 IV, but the screen is so much nicer and it's just a nicer camera to use overall, I find. So I'm going to be using it for this wedding because a destination wedding is a little bit slower. I think Lindsay might also come. We're not certain. She's not hired, but she's there at the hotel. So she'll probably just maybe come shoot some behind the scenes or maybe do some photography or maybe do some additional video clips. She will be using the Canon R6 Mark II if she does decide to take some wedding pictures. And I would say typically the travel lens for both of us is the 35. So it'll be the 35 f1.8 RF. She will also bring the Samyang 85 f1.4 as well, because she is going to be doing some family shoots while we're down there. If you're on the Canon side of things, the 50 f1.8 RF is also an incredible tool. I think with destination weddings, I kind of do my best. I always find myself in maybe situations that I don't want to attract too much attention to myself. So the smaller the camera, I think kind of the better. When you're in a place that maybe you don't want to stand out too much and attract too much attention. So something like that Canon 50mm f1.8 will become an incredible tool. In my personal preference, the 51.8, which is like $200 versus the 50 f1.2, there is obviously a difference in terms of the fact that you can shoot at 1.2 and everything looks wonderful and amazing. But if you're not doing like a straight side-by-side comparison, the 51.8, I'm gonna call it 75% as good as the L version, and you are saving, at least in Canada, like let's call it $2,500, so I don't have to look it up. But you're saving a lot of money to go with that. You're also getting closer focus distance, as well as just a smaller, more candid kit that people will maybe pay a little bit less attention to, which I like. I love the fact now that I can shoot candids without looking through an EVF. I don't shoot through my EVF whatsoever really at all any longer. I use the screen, and by getting candids on the screen and just kind of, I guess, pivoting around and just being able to see what you're doing, kind of shooting almost around corners, that is the way that I do my candid coverage now. And I find that I get much more real moments that people don't notice the camera and then try to act like themselves. They're just legitimately acting like themselves. The cameras are quiet, they're small, they're just great quality. So I am super happy with the past couple of years of transitions, and the Sony a7R5 is no exception to that. I'm very excited. And just the GM glass in general, I would say is leaps and bounds over when I tried Sony many, many years ago. And I could never get the color palette right. And it is still a little bit more challenging. So Nikon files in Adobe systems, I don't know what the deal is, but they're amazing all of the time. And when it came to switching to Canon, I had a little bit of struggles, specifically when things got either backlit or I wanted to add some warmth to the image. I always felt the warmth didn't really come in the way that I wanted it to, the way that it did with my Nikon files. And Sony always lagged behind Canon in that as well. The one struggle, please let me know in the comments if I'm doing something wrong and I'm a total idiot. But when I'm shooting hybrid photo video, I shoot in S-Cinetone in video mode. And when I set the picture profile to S-Cinetone in video mode, it also activates in photography mode. And I don't want that. I want to separate them, but I can't find a way. And I've searched on the internet, I've asked literal Sony people, and no one seems to have a solution for that. So if I want to be shooting no picture profile in photography mode and S-Cinetone in video mode, how do I do that? I'm a professional photographer. I know a lot about cameras and I can't figure that one out. So I hope that I'm an idiot and that somebody can just let me know right now, because that would be really, really appreciated. An interesting thing with destination weddings is that if you are doing them with your partner, is that you can kind of split kit. So you don't got to bring, you don't got to bring 2 camera bodies each. Maybe you bring a backup for both of you, and then you each have your main camera body with you. I will have 2 camera bodies with me because as of right now, I am solo photo videoing this wedding. However, if this was a package that both Lindsay and myself were hired for, I would show up to that wedding day probably with 3 cameras. So I would have my main camera, Lindsay would have her main camera, and we would have a backup. Now that I've kind of started to switch to Sony, the ideal would be if you shoot the same system. So you both shoot Canon, you both have R6s or whatever, and you can share lenses. And that's very, very helpful. Now with me kind of being off like this, I'll bring a backup for myself because I know that I'm going to be wanting to shoot with these lenses. Technically, if something were to happen, if I was there alone and I didn't have a backup, I could borrow Lindsay's camera, or I could just bring her camera with me for the day. So that's something to consider. The smaller the kit I think you can bring, the better. The less you stand out. I'm also, I guess, depending on where in the world we are, I'm also a little bit hesitant if I'm in like a situation like a resort or something, that it's very obvious that I am the one there, that I'm taking some pictures. I have some camera gear in my room. I'm pretty conscious in the fact that I won't usually bring it out prior to the wedding day. So the wedding day is the first day that I'm a photographer on the vacation. And I will actually, maybe this is overkill, and I'll actually shift my stay usually to be, so if it's, you get like a 7-day stay or whatever as part of the package, and at least flying from Canada to a lot of countries, you kind of get a better deal on a 7-day stay than you would on like a 3 or a 5-day stay. So I will typically offset that so that I'm with the couple for a little bit, but then usually everybody leaves and I'm there alone. Or I will come a little bit early if the wedding is early in the week, and I'll be there a few days before everybody gets there, and then I'll kind of overlap with them and I'll depart a little bit early. This is from experience of that. I'm going to say 80% of destination weddings are amazing. The people that do them are just your ideal clients, likely, if you're interested in destinations. However, there are that 20% that become a little bit challenging. And if you can just not be anywhere near them, it's kind of awesome. So I kind of hedge that I'm with them for maybe 3 or 4 days. If it's awesome, it's awesome. And then I kind of do my own thing for a couple of days. And that's from my experience. I'm going to say that I've done maybe 50, maybe 60 destination weddings in my time. And that's kind of what I've learned and what I'm comfortable with. I also very much enjoy being somewhere alone. I enjoy traveling alone for some weird reason. I enjoy the airport experience a lot more. Lindsay does as well, which is kind of funny. And I just enjoy having a couple of days. I feel like it's very calming, clears your head a little bit, allows you to do the work that typically what I'll do before a destination wedding is I will just get through all of my outstanding work. So I will sit down, any galleries I have to deliver, any edits I have to do, any videos that I still have in the queue, I will get everything done. So when I travel, even if it's only for like 5 days, I'll do that mad rush the 5 days before that wedding, and I'll get everything done. So when I'm actually away, I don't really have anything to do. There's always like bonus tasks you can do, but I find that that's kind of nice. You get a little bit of a vacation, and I usually use it to start a new project and fill more time. So maybe don't do that, but it's what I do. All right. So to recap, my destination wedding kit, a 35 and a 50 this time, sometimes 35 and an 85. Not bringing a 70-200, bringing 2 camera bodies, but if I'm with somebody else, we'll usually each bring our main and then a third one as a backup for both of us. And then it's nice to have a wider lens just in case, but I don't know. I don't find myself using anything wider than a 35 a lot of the time. Now into some questions. Derek Pars asks, what is the best pizza crust? I don't know. I can't. All pizza crusts are, he also has a second part of the question. Any cons of the Sony system, tempted to switch as a Nikon user? So I guess depending on if you're coming from Nikon DSLR or Nikon Z6 II, I would say the cons of the Sony system are what I already spoke about in this podcast, that I can't seem to separate the picture profile in photo and video mode. It's a bit annoying. Other than that, I feel like they've kind of addressed most of the cons that they had. It used to be that the colors are weird, that the lenses would have like a weird cast that would make everything look like a 2000s TV show. That seems to all have disappeared with the new lenses. I guess the downside is if you are buying those more expensive lenses, they're as expensive as they would be for any other system. But the benefit is that Sigma and Tamron both actively make equipment and lenses for Sony. So you have other options. You just have to kind of investigate yourself and figure out what works the best for you and what looks the best, and also maybe what fits the price point. For other cons, switching from Nikon, you're not going to have as much fun with the files, especially if you're more into landscape photography. I find that you can still make the images look great, but I found that it was a bit easier to get those Nikon files there. Another thing, if you're on the Z series, the 24-70 f2.8 for Nikon, the new one, I'm going to say it's like one of the best lenses ever made. I love that lens entirely. It makes incredible images. It's wonderful to work with. That is something that you don't get with Sony, even though the 24-70, the new one's small, it doesn't create images in the same way that the Nikon one does. So that's a bit of a bummer. I'll also rank the Nikon 1.8 primes above the 1.8 primes for Sony. So if you're a prime shooter and you're on the Z series and you're shooting the 51.8, that is a professional quality lens in my opinion. And coming over to the Sony side and shooting the same 50 millimeter f1.8, or maybe we'll say the 85 1.8 versus the 85 1.8 on Nikon, you're not going to be as happy, I don't think, with those. It's still a great lens, but you're going to be a little bit happier on the Nikon side of things. With Sony though, I'm going to leave the Z9 kind of out of this because that is an incredible autofocus and I'm very happy with that camera. But if you're looking at any of the other Nikon cameras and you're comparing them to Sony, the autofocus is going to be a lot better. In my opinion, the Canon autofocus and the R6 Mark II as well as the R3 is better, and at least it predicts what my brain wants it to do significantly more often than my Sony cameras. The A7R Mark V is slowly kind of coming around and I'm happier with that, but my A7 IV versus the R6 Mark II, which is kind of in the same price point. The R6 Mark II kind of destroys it, I would say, in most ways. But then the downside with Canon is that you're stuck with the Canon lenses only because they're not going to do any third-party stuff, and they killed my favorite Samyang 85, or I guess Samyang maybe shouldn't have made it without a license, but that lens you can't find anymore, the Samyang 85 1.4 for Canon RF, the autofocus version. So there's pros and cons to everything, and hopefully that addressed some of them. But yeah, the fortunate side is that any way you go in the photography industry now is a good choice. So you're not really going to find yourself in a system where just like everything is bad and there's a way better option. There's always going to be better options. I guess it's just about picking what one works the best for you. For me, Sony and Canon are the two for me this year and the past 2 years, I guess. Marcus asks, marketing for adventure elopements. So I have, I'm going to say a lot of the content that's within, if you're a member or if you sign up for Book More Weddings 2023, a lot of the content within that can easily be applied to adventure weddings. And the thing that I would be doing is, well, it's like any destination wedding. You have to kind of do one first. And when you do that one, get as much video content as you can to work as marketing for future ones. That is kind of the biggest key, I would say. The more pieces of content you can make from that in different ways, whether it's maybe a 20-minute video that's actually behind the scenes with you talking through like, hey, this is why adventure elopement's important, not focused on the gear like what I do when I try to make educational stuff for other photographers, but more focused specifically on the couple's experience and why someone would choose an adventure elopement and why you're the right photographer for them. So building something in that realm and having that as a main feature on your website would be one of the keys. And then I think it would also be a transition of your entire brand over time. If this is something that you really want to focus on, I will say from somebody that has done them in a place. So I live in a place that adventure elopements kind of exist for a very small market. And if I was to market very heavily on those, I do think that I would start to miss out on some of my more standard weddings. So maybe something to consider as well, that if they are important to you, that maybe don't overhaul your entire brand to all be about adventure elopements. If you live in a place that allows that and that you can be doing those on Monday through Friday and you can shoot 5 weddings a week in a helicopter, by all means, switch up your brand to be specifically about that. But yeah, I think it all comes down to video content and really becoming an expert in them as well, and helping people plan and making the assets and the material on your website to help people actually book the adventure elopements and figure out what they actually want to do. Because when you're like, yes, that looks cool, but how do we do that? And the faster and easier you can make that process, and if you can connect them with all of the people that they need to be connected with in order to execute this wedding, you're going to be seen as the expert and you're going to be brought in pretty much all the time. And also your content's going to rank so high on Google. And if you promote anything through Instagram or you start doing some tips on TikTok, all of a sudden you're going to see that your content is rising always to the top. Isaac asks, lens setup for Iceland. Lens setup for Iceland. Last time I went, I brought only really the 35 to 150 Tamron, and it was great, and I loved it. I think for Iceland, if you are a Sony shooter, that's a very nice lens to have because you kind of get everything and you don't have to switch lenses. You could also shoot 2 camera bodies, depending on weather. If there's horizontal rain, it's like kind of, I guess you can change lenses in cars, but there's humidity shifts and all kinds of stuff. So if you can stay on one lens on each camera body, I would recommend that. That can be, I would say, a 35. I find that I don't have to get wider than that. And then maybe a 50 or an 85, probably a 50, I would say. I would say a 30 and a 50. Nah, maybe do 35, 85. I feel like you get a little bit more versatility out of that. That would be my recommendation. Editor Taylor punching in here for a moment. 24 to 70 would also be a good option, I think, as well. And also another thing that I think maybe to be aware of is for Iceland, it's nice to include some of the background. I'm used to just shooting everything at 1.2, 1.4 and just obliterating the background. Shooting that Tamron lens and kind of being stuck at like f2.5 actually included a nice amount of the background. And I'm actually happier with that image than if I would have just obliterated everything. So I'm happy that it forced me to do that because I wouldn't have done that otherwise. I just would have shot everything as I normally shoot it. All right, next question. What was your deciding factor that made you move from weddings instead of music? I would say money. There's not really any money in music, unfortunately. It's fun to do, but you find a pretty limited career within it. I'm sure that people have proven me wrong, but I would say that there are thousands and thousands of wedding photographers making full-time incomes. I would say there's not that many music photographers. It's super fun to do. You get to meet all your favorite artists and take pictures of them. That's awesome and great. But I worked for free t-shirts for a very long time, and it's nice to have something that has stability in life, that I don't have to be a starving artist for my entire career. Next question, how do you deal with flash in barns with the old orange wood to not get terrible color bounced? So one solution would be that you'd actually set up, if you have like a softbox or something, you could set that up. You could do off-camera light and use kind of somewhat direct. What I do, and what I've noticed working in most barns, so if it's like very, very orange, maybe it'll be a problem, but you can kind of get away with bouncing off of not typical neutral surfaces as long as you're white balancing correctly. And I found in a lot of barns that I have to amp up the power because the orange absorbs a lot of the light, but it kind of kicks you back something that just kind of looks like a tungsten bulb a lot of the time. So you can kind of balance that, or if you have gels for your flash, maybe you could gel against it. So if you put a blue gel and you're hitting the orange with blue, maybe that's going to cancel out and be a little bit more white. It's not an exact science, but in my experience, just adding a little bit more flash power and working with that warmer light has actually worked out surprisingly well. And that might sound ridiculous, but it really did kind of balance with everything going on. So yeah, I don't know, pretty wild. Next question, can you do a workshop in London? I'm actually doing, if you search for a photography farm, Thrive, Lisa Devlin is doing one in UK and one in Glasgow that I'm going to be at in March. So I will be there. I think I do kind of a short talk the one day, and then the next day we go out and we do a shoot. So if you want to be part of either, come on through, either Brighton or Glasgow. I will send me a DM on Instagram if you want a direct link, because I think I tried to search for it and it was hard to find. So I can send that to you if you need that. Peter Lindgren asks, how much time did I spend in B-roll land? If you didn't see the B-roll land reel, you can find it on my Instagram at Taylor Jackson. And I spent a lot of time in B-roll land. I didn't realize that I was constantly trolling B-roll. And then Tyler, my editor, put together a few vertical clips for me out of, this is from an Iceland travel landscape photography tutorial that'll be coming out, I believe, in partnership with Luminar in the near future. But yeah, I didn't realize that I chirped the B-roll every single time that I had to walk away in B-roll. So yeah, I spent a lot of time there, I guess, especially in Iceland. Next question, last question. What hard/ugly truths should wedding photographers, young wedding photographers know about the wedding industry? So I think that there's no real ugly truth. There's no thing that would be surprising or like the evil underbelly of wedding photography. What I think that a lot of younger photographers don't know is how relationship based the industry is. And even for something like getting into second shooting and being a second photographer, to just cold call a bunch of people. Like I tried to do this and I failed. No one got back. One dude got back to me, and that didn't really work. Had I just built relationships with photographers that I was genuinely interested in, thought that we could maybe do some work together. Now it's even easier because you can just kind of be digital friends. Back then it was a little bit more challenging because there was no Instagram, no Facebook to easily be in touch and to keep up with people. But even if it's something as simple as like you drop a few comments over time on somebody's Instagram, whenever they upload a nice image, tell them it's a nice image. After a couple of months, you're going to be kind of just a normal person in their life. And at that point, they're going to be a lot more likely to respond to you if you say, hey, I'd love to second shoot for you if you have any opportunities coming up. Don't ask in the winter when they're not doing anything. Ask, I would say, maybe a couple of months or maybe a month before wedding season starts, or even in wedding season is fine as well. A lot of us get stuck for second photographers for whatever reason. Everybody works super last minute, and sometimes it's just like, oh, it's Tuesday and I need a second photographer for Saturday, apparently. Great. And you'll find that a ton of wedding photographers operate that way. So being last minute and just having Saturdays available, or being able to make Saturdays available if you need to, will probably go a long way. And then when it comes to working with venues and working with wedding planners, it's kind of the same, that if a wedding planner doesn't know you, it's going to be hard for that couple, if they've hired the planner, to actually book you, because the wedding planner is going to be like, no, these are the 3 photographers that I work with all the time. And they're going to get pushed kind of heavily in that direction. So I think it's all about just forming relationships over time. And there are a number of different ways to do this. I talk about this in kind of all the Book More Weddings courses, but just being a genuinely nice person that's willing to help them out will go a long way. And to really form those relationships when you see that they could exist, because one, it's going to help both of your businesses, especially if you're, I don't know, this deep into a wedding photography podcast, you probably kind of care about wedding photography and you're probably going to do pretty well over the next bunch of years. So you're going to bring them business as well. So it's not just a one-sided deal of you trying to weasel your way in there to get referrals. It's going to work both ways. And the other benefit is that the more friends you make in the industry, the more fun the industry actually is. So I think everybody kind of knows that if you're a wedding vendor, it's kind of weirdly all consuming, sounds like the wrong term to use, but it really does take up a lot of different aspects of your life. That if you're in this industry, a lot of your friends are also going to be in this industry for a number of reasons, from the fact that like you all work on the weekends and you all have Monday, Tuesdays off. So just organically, it's going to be easier for you to hang out and do things, to just a number of shared interests. And we're all small business owners as well. So I think there's a lot of commonalities there. So I think a lot of relationships are a little bit easier to make as an adult. I know making friendships as an adult is a bit weird, but I think in the wedding space, it is a little bit easier. So that's all for today. Thanks for watching. Book More Weddings 2023 out now. I have to reference my list of all the things it comes with because it's so many. So you get Book More Weddings 2022, full course. It's a completely different course. Book More Weddings 2021, entirely different course. 22 comes with 50 Facebook ad templates you can just steal and use, and Facebook ad setup and everything. You also get my Lightroom preset collection, my wedding photography contract, email templates, wedding photo day checklist, and the new video set that went up about a month ago called Making Your First Million in Wedding Photography. So you get all that whenever you get Book More Weddings 2023. And if you decide that you're okay to spend $20 more, which is not a lot of money, you get so much more. I'm not even going to go through it. It's everything on the members website, which is a lot. So you get all those bonuses plus about 3, 5, 7 times more in downloads. And especially if you're interested in hybrid photo video coverage, you will find a lot of good value in there. And as always, everything's 100% money back guarantee. So if you sign up and you hate it, just send me an email. My email, you can just respond to the one that you get and I will send your money back. But also important, you have to get in on Book More Weddings 2023 if you want the discount and you want all the bonuses before January 20th. So get in before January 20th if you want it, because after that, Book More Weddings 2023 will be not available for purchase until March 1st again. So get in on that now if you're interested. Let's see you again on another time. Drop any questions, comments, concerns in the questions below, and I will try my best to include them on next week's episode.